Welcome to our first video in this series on effective professional development. You can find the guidance report on this page of the EEF's website alongside other tools and resources and an overview of each of the recommendations. We know that there's a clear link between high quality teaching and student achievement, and research also tells us it can narrow the disadvantage gap. And professional development is the missing piece of this jigsaw to ensure that teachers are able to achieve the best with their students. Professional development has great potential, but it also comes with costs. So there is clearly a need, therefore, for professional development to be well designed, well selected and well implemented so that the investment is justified. So the report builds on what we know about professional development up to this point. And we also want to set the report in the context of really effective implementation planning, because professional development is one aspect of implementation planning and change in school settings. And we'll show you where professional development sits within that cycle. So before we start, I'd just like you to pause the video and read through this vignette that is in the guidance report, which is Alina, who is a head teacher of an all-through school. So this example is a common problem for those of us with decision making on professional development. There's no shortage of advice and good ideas out there, but if we were asked what we should tell Alina to focus on, it's actually quite hard to think about what advice would we give her. It's difficult to know because there was little evidence about what professional development, a good professional development, should actually look like. So targeting the problem that needs solving is one thing, but solid advice about the design and delivery hasn't really been around. So by the end of this series of videos, we hope you've got something to hook this on and think about what will actually make a difference. And this is one of the things that Becky Francis talks about in the introduction to the guidance report. We've not really had a clear set of principles about effective professional development and our delivery of that. There have been reviews that have been potentially impactful, but there's been very loose definitions about what we mean about professional development. So you'll be familiar with some of these things. We've had the teacher standards since 2016. We've had this report on the developing great teaching from the Teacher Development Trust. And in that, we had a lot of information about the consensus view, but there were doubts about this evidence. We've since had the ICT core content framework, which is much more evidence focused in its design, the same with the early career framework. But in addition to that, we have been challenged in examples like this report from Harry Fletcher-Wood and Sam Sims about how we've got professional development wrong. So we know that professional development is a crucial lever to improving learning, but the evidence base hasn't really provided in the past the clarity that we would hope to see. So we're going to think in this video about what we mean when we talk about professional development. The evidence has really moved us forward on that understanding and has really sharpened our thinking. When CPD is generically delivered and it's not about changing a specific need, it tends not to have impact. We know that giving teachers resources and materials is likely to have very little impact. If you provide them with a VLE of reading, of materials, of PowerPoints, of videos, just giving people materials won't enable change. We know that one-off inputs are very unlikely to have any impact. So those one-off CPD sessions that then have no follow-up at all are not likely to have impact. And we need to focus on changing practice and how we can identify specific learner needs and develop our professional development around that. So this is the consensus view from those kind of reports on what does work, but there have been questions about this. There are criticisms about the evidence strength in that report. We were taking some of our key professional development ideas from this report and they were probably a little bit outdated. These were the things that the report told us, that collaboration is important, it needs to have engagement with theory and have some practical classroom application. it needs to be sustained and iterative, and that was the consensus view. What that's led to now is this systematic review led by Sam Sims and Harry Fletcher Wood. There have been an expert panel of practitioners, academics, teachers, classroom practitioners, and a systematic review of evidence, and they reviewed 104 evaluations of professional development programmes. And this is intended to support those that design and select professional development, and it's aimed at improving the attainment of pupils aged 3 to 18. So it is a guidance report that covers all phases. And the guidance aims to provide clearer guidance on what might work when designing, selecting and delivering professional development. So to summarise some of the key findings of that research and evidence review, we know that professional development can have 1 month's additional progress. We know that the impact varies widely across different PD programmes, and we need to look at why that might occur. We know that professional development programmes that have more mechanisms tend to have higher impact, and we will unpick what those mechanisms are and what they look like in practice in other videos. We know that the findings suggest that balanced designs have more impact than non-balanced designs, and we will look in another video about what that phrase means, what it means to have a balanced design. We know that professional development is often implemented with low fidelity, and we know that that is much more likely to be implemented with fidelity when we look at the school's needs and existing practices, and implementation planning is taken into consideration as well. So this is the definition of professional development that we're working with in this guidance report. Structured, facilitated activity for teachers intending to increase their teaching ability. That's our working definition. So when we unpick that a little bit more, the focus on teaching is about a broad range of skills. That might be classroom instruction, it might be classroom management, assessment. It's not things like educational technology programs. It's more than just providing teacher knowledge. It's about focusing on ability to deliver something within a classroom. And it's definitely not about general updates about school businesses or school policies. So one of the limitations in previous literature on professional development was the inconsistency in the way PD is defined. So the review informing this guidance really sought to have a much tighter definition of that. So we define professional development as a structured and facilitated activity. And the guidance report gives us some examples of what is and what isn't counted as professional development. In the what is not professional development, we're not saying that these other activities aren't important or necessary, but in the report they chose to focus on professional development that was focused on developing teacher ability. During the pandemic, we needed lots of training on how to use technology. So how to use our learning platforms like Google Classroom, Microsoft Teams, maybe how to construct a Google form in that kind of practical sense, but that's not professional development. If working with staff on how to construct a Google form is also coupled with effective questioning and how to design effective multiple choice questioning and how to do diagnostic assessment and identify need to then inform teaching, that would then become professional development. So we are defining professional development here as things like monthly twilight sessions with a particular focus. You can see there how twilight sessions over a series of months on formative assessment is iterative in nature. And then examples such as teachers receiving curriculum programs via email with schemes of work and assessment materials that they go off and deliver, that's not professional development, nor is some kind of information session about an update to a policy. So in the videos, we'll go through each of these recommendations in more detail, but to summarise, Recommendation 1 focuses on the mechanisms when designing and selecting professional development. Recommendation 2 then unpicks those mechanisms. The mechanisms are divided into 4 groups, and each of those groups plays a different role. We may have professional development which includes a mechanism from each of those groups, and we'll look at how that helps us to construct a balanced design in our programme. And we'll talk in those videos about why we use this language of mechanisms. And then finally, recommendation 3 is about the importance of careful implementation, and it covers some of the barriers that are often faced when designing professional development. So we're going to use this guidance report as a lens to scrutinise our professional development in schools. So it's worth having a look at the detail that sits behind these headline recommendations, and in each of the next videos we will look in more detail about what this really means. And in the next video we will focus on recommendation 1. Thanks for listening.